Good morning. All right. I want to thank you for having me back. For those of you guys who weren't here last time, I just want to say that it's a privilege anytime I get to come and speak the gospel. It's not something I take lightly, and I hope today as we open the Word, God shows us more of Himself so we can become more like Him, especially with just the amplifiedness of what this season is, being Christmas. So before we dive in, let's pray, and then we'll jump into His Word. Okay. Father God, we thank you for today. We just thank you for the worship and your Spirit here already. We just feel your presence, and as I've already said, just this season really amplifies it for us, and we just thank you for that. God, I just ask today as we open your Word that you open our hearts so that we can become more like you and go out into a world that desperately needs you and be that message and messenger. We thank you for who you are, what you've done, and what you continue to do in your name. Amen. All right, we're going to be in the Gospel of John today, John chapter 1. And as you turn there, just a little preface, obviously it's the Advent season, and that Advent season is really the season of expectation of Jesus coming. There's this amplifiedness, as I've already said, about that Jesus, God, is going to come and be man among us. And there's this expectation as you read through the Old Testament, and there's all of this, the prophets, and this expectation of there's this Messiah that will one day come. And then we have the Gospels, and all the Gospels lay it out in a little bit different way, but John really, and what we're going to read here, does more of an overarching view. So John doesn't cover the manger, the virgin birth, the angels coming, none of that. John covers it more on a higher spiritual overtone to the whole thing. And we'll see that, in fact, and we're going to read these two verses. There's only two verses in the first chapter here of John that really even indicate or talk about what we would consider the Advent or this season of Jesus coming. But what we're going to do, for those of you guys who were here last time, we're going to read through the entire text. We're going to go through verses 1 through 18, and then we'll go back and kind of bite off chunks of that and look into it a little bit more. So I believe this will also be on the screen if I understood correctly, but we're going to go John chapter 1, and we'll start in verse 1. And it says this: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shined in the darkness, and the darkness had not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light that enlightens everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to who all did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were not born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen His glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about Him and cried out, 'This was He whom I said, He who comes after me ranks before me, because He was before me.' And from His fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God, who is at the Father's side. He has made Him known." So there's a lot of chunks here, but there are two verses that you saw there, 9 and 14, that John talks about this God becoming man, this God-man coming in. Now let's go back to verse 1. He said, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God." Now, there's a lot of, I don't know the grammatical definition of what he's doing here. I'm sure there is one, and I'm not good at grammar, so I didn't even look it up because it would confuse me. But he's getting words here that are all together. He's saying it in such a way that's a little confusing, but what he's saying is he's declaring that this Jesus, this God, is this sovereignty. I mean, it's just this declaration from the jump, from the beginning, that as you read the rest of this book, this letter, that from the start you understand that this person we're going to talk about, this is God. It's this declaration from the go. And then verse 3, he talks about how everything was made by him. Not anything was made that was made without him. And in fact, Paul echoes this later in Colossians, my absolute favorite chunk of verses in the Bible. In Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 20, Paul echoes the same sentiment while expanding on a little bit. But the gist of this is that nothing, and again, we don't want to read over this. We read over it so, there is nothing that was made that was not made by this one we're about to talk about. Everything you see, everything you experience, all the beauty that is of the world, all of the wonderful experiences that occur, those things, those experiences and those visual elements that you see, those were made by him. He is the creator. Amen. In saying this, he's also indicating here that Jesus was forever. In fact, there are some heresies that state that when Jesus was born, that's when Jesus was made. And John is clear here that Jesus is eternal. He's co-eternal with the Father and the Spirit. And that Jesus is actually the creator of these things. So the beauty that you experience, and this is why even other places, Paul especially, says that we have no excuse not to worship God because everything we experience was made by him. Everything cries back to him. Every beautiful moment you experience, whether you are saved or not, is a grace to you by this creator. And in this Christmas season, it's even amplified more that is a gift. All of those things, the birth of my children, the wonderful experiences that I've had, all of those things were created and given to me by this creator. So don't miss this very simple sentence that nothing was made that was made. It was by him. And this one that made all things, verses 4 and 5, he says this, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There are a lot of dark things in this world. Can we just be honest about that? Right, if we can't be honest in church, we can't be anywhere. There's a lot of things, and I'm not just talking about bad things or annoying things. I'm talking about gut-wrenching, make you physically ill, you cannot stand it, traumatizing things that are in this world. Things that, if you talk about, you weep about. Because they should not occur, it should not be happening, but it's the truth and reality of a fallen world. But John states from the jump, from the go, from the start, that this God that created all things, he is the light, and this is the theme that carries through John, but he is the light, and this light shined, and guess what could not overcome it? Darkness. All of those bad things, all of those evil deeds, all of the things that make us want to give up. They go, how can that occur? That question's asked often by those that don't believe in Jesus. Well, if he's so good, why is that happening? And John states that we're in a fallen world, but the light came, and guess what cannot overcome that light? The darkness. He's setting this up, and he wants his readers to understand, because the whole book, the letter of John, is to convince and reassure people that Jesus is this God that was hoped for. That Jesus, the one that comes into this world, is the one that they were longing for, is this Messiah that was promised, and he is the one that has come, and he tells them from the go that he created all things, he is the light, and that nothing can overcome him. Amen. Mainly because he made everything. Move on here to verses 6 through 8. It says this, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness to the light, that light we just talked about, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to bear witness about the light. Now, when you first read, like we did, just straight through, that seems like an odd part to it just comes out of nowhere. Why are we talking about John in the middle of the light, and then we're actually going to go back into talking about Jesus? So why is John there? John is this witness, and it's clearly stated that he's sent from God to declare who this light is. In fact, if you read the other Gospels, John is approached by a number of people saying, hey, are you this Messiah? And if you're not this Messiah, maybe you're this prophet. Maybe you're the prophets of old that have come back. And John is clear over and over again that he is not that. He is simply pointing to this Jesus. He is simply pointing to this light that he wants them to know about. In a lesser way, let's not forget that if we believe, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute because John does, but as believers, we are also this messenger. I mean, do you conceive that? Do we understand that? Do we live in that light? Right, so the term that helps me daily, that I try to remember daily, is that my theology is going to affect my doxology. So how I understand God is going to affect how I live. So if I understand that I am to be a messenger, that he has saved me, and because he has saved me, I am to go into the world and spread his message, right? That's going to affect how I live. So John here is, in the Gospels, put in between this enormous text of who this God is and that he's coming and what he's going to do. And John's stuck in the middle there, and it says that John was declaring this message. He wasn't the light. His one job, what was his one job? It says it right there, was to bear witness about the light. He doesn't have a whole set of, this is his job description. This is what he's to bear witness about the light. Christian, are you bearing witness about this light? Not this, well, Jesus, yeah, he's a good guy. He helps me a lot when I'm down. That's not. Do you see what John said here at the beginning? He created the world. He set everything in motion, and even darkness cannot overcome him. This is the light that John is bearing witness about. Not this little itty bitty God that can't do a whole lot and doesn't really affect my life that much and doesn't change much. John is bearing witness about this light that the worst of the world cannot overcome. I mean, do you fathom that? That is, so we can get caught up in the whole Christmas season and gifts and busy and buy and I don't know, the credit card is going to come and I don't know what I'm going to do, I'm going to panic and I'm going to die. But we can get caught up in that. But what Christmas is really about is this light. This light come into the world. This one that made all things and that all things are made through and for. And we can get really caught up in everything else. And wouldn't that be the perfect trap of the devil, to get us so busy on everything else that we can't focus on the one thing that we're supposed to? I mean, that'd be a really simple plan, wouldn't it? I got a whole list of everything you got to do. You got to buy, you got to get ready, you got to cook dinner, you got to freak out, you got to have a panic attack, you got to cry a little bit, then you got to go back to fixing everything, and we might panic attack later. We don't know. We'll see if we have time to do it or not. Or we could focus on the light. John had one job, it says, to bear witness to this light. This light that the writer of John has already spoken about, this God that created everything. That we honestly can't even fathom that. Moving on, 9 through 11. It says this, the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. That's one of the verses here. No manger scene, no angels, no wise men, just the light of the world, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. It's a little thing here, but I think we'll miss it, is that have you ever sat down and thought about the fact that the God that created everything chose, right? I mean, there was nothing forces God to do anything. He chose to come into the world. And I don't get his ways. Honestly, if I was God, it would have been a whole, much bigger entrance, and I wouldn't have been dependent on people changing my diapers and feeding me and taking care of me. But he chose this way to experience our humanity, to be able to share in the experiences that we have so that we can always come to him and he knows our suffering. He chose to come into the world. And Christian, that should be a great encouragement to us. He chose to come to pursue us. He chose that. Despite of the darkness, not only in the world, but in us. I mean, we'll talk about it here in a minute because it talks about the grace, but are you ever blown away at the fact that Jesus came to pursue you despite yourself? I mean, there's things that I've done that I wouldn't want anybody to ever know about. But Jesus knows, and he came to pursue me despite of that. And if you're in here and you don't know Jesus, let me assure you, there is nothing that you have ever done or could ever do that would make him not pursue you. In fact, the creator of all things made a choice to come do that. And you may choose not to believe that, and you may choose to think it's crazy, because we'll talk about this in a minute too, because the whole Christmas thing is a little crazy to people that don't believe, but he chose to do that. He chose to come into the world for us. Move on to verse 12. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And I want to focus here on that word believe in verse 12. Because I think it's confusing, and I'm not honestly sure why the Greek word there is actually trust, not believe. Because belief and trust are a little different. Belief, trust, and faith, I think, are words that we confuse sometimes, because I can believe in someone. Okay, so as an example, I can believe my parents are real people, that they exist and they live and they do day-to-day things and they are real people. However, I trust in my parents because I know their character. I know that if I need something, I can come to them. I know they love me because they've shown that. I know that they will, if I had to go to them for something, they would be there for me on that. So belief and trust, realize, are different. So you can believe that Jesus is Jesus, but it's different to trust that he is who he says he is. And again, your theology will affect your doxology. So if you trust that he is who he says he is, we live in that manner, don't we? So we believe that he is good. So we live a life that reflects that. I just don't have some outside idea that, well, Jesus was a real person, or maybe Jesus lived, but I trust that Jesus says he was God, and because he says he was God, I'm going to believe it. See, he says there, those who believed in his name have been given the right to be children of God. Not of blood, which is like a nationality, not of flesh, which would be more of like your race, the race you're part of, nor the will of man, which would be your works or your doing, but, what does it say? But of God. Again, in the Bible, those of us that preach really just preach one message over and over again, but it's that Jesus saves you. Not of anything you could do. I mean, yeah, let me repeat the same thing I said last time I was here, right? It's that he saves you not of anything you could do for yourself. It's not of your will. It's not of your blood. It's not of your flesh. It's nothing but him that saves you. Because you trusted in his name, because you trust that he says he is who he says he is. And that's where it comes, I think, in a world that is very cynical and very dark at times. that your faith will be tested. I mean, he says that those who believed in his name have been given the right to be children of God. So as a Christian, I trust that Jesus is who he says he is. I trust in the virgin birth. I trust in the miracles that we have recorded. I trust that he died, that he was raised, that he ascended. Let's just be real here for a second. Those are crazy thoughts to the mind that doesn't believe. I mean, I have friends that just flat out say that's insanity to believe that. I mean, can we just be honest? Outside of the work of the Holy Spirit and helping us understand who Jesus is, that does sound like insanity. I believe that someone had a baby without any natural relations. That sounds crazy. Okay? However, he said, for those that trust that Jesus is who he says he is, that his word is true, he says he's given us the right to become sons and daughters, and not by anything we've done for ourselves, but because of him. The God that created everything, that put in everything into motion, that John says is the light of the world, right? That enormous God decided to become man. And in doing so, decided to pursue me and you. And saves us. If that does not knock you back a little bit, you need to wake up. I mean, let me just throw that out there. The worst you can do is not invite me back again, right? So understand that. The God that created everything chose to come. That's what we're celebrating in Christmas. Chose to come to pursue us. The greatest gift we could have hoped for, the greatest gift we could have been given, is this Jesus coming to pursue us in spite of our darkness and saving us and going, you can't hold anything up that says you did it. It is only by his merit. It is only by his work. It is only by him. And he chose to do that. Not because we're good, not because we're great, because he is gracious. And that is the gift of Christmas. So no matter what I get, and I'm hoping I get some really cool stuff this year. No matter what I get, it is a dull, faded piece of something that will eventually be thrown away in comparison to the gift of Jesus. Him choosing to come and saving us despite ourselves. I hope we get that. Because this trust we have to become the children of God is this deep and abiding work that he works in us. That cannot be overcome by the darkness. I mean, do you understand that how great of a gift that is? I mean, just let me pound this hammer a little bit longer. That no matter how bad the world gets, it cannot overcome this light we have in Jesus. And to be frank, it can get really dark. I mean, none of us, I would say, in this room really can even fathom what some of our brothers and sisters in other countries, the darkness they're going through right now for their faith in Jesus. I mean, let's just be frank. It can get dark. But that darkness, even in the darkest times, even when the disciples and the apostles and the early church is persecuted and put in prison, you know the thing they have to hold on to? The thing that John speaks of here is that light. This light that has come into the world, don't miss it, guys. I mean, we're so used to hearing that Jesus came down as a baby, and I mean, we've almost got numb to it. It's the creator of the universe has come to save us, despite of us. Let's move on. Verse 14. This is the other little verse here that he even indicates anything about Advent. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory as the only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "He was he whom I said, He who comes before me ranks before me because he was before me. And from his fullness we have received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. There's a lot here, so we'll dive in a little bit to it. Obviously, 14 is this speaking of Jesus coming down and walking among us. John obviously declaring again, but verse 16, and from him, his fullness, we have received grace upon grace. And I think this is something, again, it's just because of how our lives work and the mundaneness of just every day we go to work, we do this, we come home, we have dinner, and a lot of the times it's the same thing, we just kind of lose it. But do you understand, Christian, that everything that you do is a common grace to you? The fact that you got up this morning is a common grace. The fact that you can breathe is a common grace. The fact that you are healthy is a common grace. The fact that you're alive is grace. And here's the grace of God, that even those that don't believe him get to experience the same grace. I mean, isn't that mind-blowing? Someone that can get up this morning and spit in the face of God, he still says, you have breath in your lungs, you have life in your body, you have things to do, beauty to experience. I mean, that is the definition of grace, is it not? Amen. That despite our arrogance, God still says, here's gifts. Here's grace. I mean, Christian, don't overlook the fact that you get to get up tomorrow. And even if you have a crummy, no good day, right? Even if everything goes wrong. Even if you get home and you go, that was the worst day ever. Got to work, everything was on fire, everyone's in a bad mood. I said, hey, good morning. They said, well, it's morning, right? And everything was just horrible. That whole day was grace to you. Praise God. It says, because of Jesus, because of his fullness, we have received grace upon grace. Don't overlook that. I mean, you know what sets us apart from the world as Christians? I mean, not only the fact that we believe and trust in Jesus, but the fact that we understand that we are living in these daily graces. So what I try to do, even when I'm having a crummy day, and it's really hard for me because when I have a crummy day, I really let it get to me. But when everybody says, hey, how's your day going? I always try to say, it's going great. It's going great. And I try to say it as non-sarcastically as possible, even if it's a bad day. So, because sometimes it's a bad day, and I just really I got to speak that word over myself. But there's been lots of times that people come up. There was one that just really hit me back a little bit, that I said that just in passing, and 5-10 minutes later the guy comes up and goes, well, why is your day so great? Because apparently he's not used to hearing that, because most people go, well, it's the morning, it's not a good one, right? I mean, that's most people's mentality apparently. And in that very short amount of time, it's not like he got saved there, it's not like, it was this amazing moment where the sky opened up, but I got to share the gospel with him a little bit, right? Because we understand these common graces, we can say, hey, why is your day so great? Man, Jesus saved me and I don't deserve it, right? I'm blessed way more than I deserve, right? I mean, that might be the only gospel they ever hear, but it's the gospel. We experience grace upon grace. That is your gift this season. This reminder, the creator of the universe came and said, grace. Something you didn't deserve, something you didn't earn. And sometimes we act like teenagers, don't we? Sometimes. We open the package and go, I wanted an iPhone, and this is not that. I deserve that. Give me that. Right? I mean, that's what we act. Sometimes we're arrogant, right? Like, we are the parable of the older son. That we're like, hey, hold up. Jesus, I went to church every Sunday. I had a pretty good attitude at work. I only talked about Carol behind her back, not Jenny, right? And I feel like you should save me a little bit more today. Sanctify me a little bit more today. Like, give me. What he's saying here is grace upon grace upon grace. Anytime you think you earned it, remember this: you didn't. Amen. Nothing you did earned it. Get that thought out of your head. Because what's going to help you go out into a world and live and be like John, this messenger that goes out and points to the light, is that your life is going to look differently, and people are going to go, well, why are you having such a great day? Why are you handling this situation differently? And you can go, believe me, I'm having a bad day. But you know what makes it better? Him. It's not that we don't experience trouble. It's not that we don't experience pain. It's not that we don't go through dark times. But we understand who the light is, and we just point to that light. It's grace upon grace upon grace. That's the difference, Christian. It's not that situations don't come to us that come to everybody else. It's that we handle these situations differently through the filter of who this Jesus is. Verse 17. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth come through Jesus Christ. Now what John is saying here, he's not going, Moses bad, Jesus good. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that the law pointed to the fact that we needed a Savior. The law points us to the fact that we cannot live up to the expectations. We can't do it. This is what the law points toward, is that Moses brought down the law and we go, that's a lot. I mean, we can try, but it's crushing upon us. We just can't do it. Even at the best, we become self-righteous. But Jesus brings grace and truth. What John is saying is he's bringing together two things. He says, what Moses was pointing to, Jesus fulfills. The reason you can't do it is because you were never meant to do it. This Jesus, this gift, this creator of the universe that has come down, this light, that's what he's talking about. That's what he wants you to see. That's why in verse 18, he says, no one has ever seen God, the only God who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. He goes, you want to know what God looks like? You want to know the representation of this God that created all things? Look to Jesus. He goes, you want to see what God looks like, the unfathomable, the maker of universes, the things that the one that puts things into motion. He goes, look at Jesus. That is your example. That is who he is. That is this Jesus. So my argument is not that we don't look, we don't go, oh, that baby Jesus is awful cute. Because I'm sure he was, though I would argue, because I've had two kids, that he probably cried when he woke up in the manger, but that is not, it's a non-theological debate to have right now. But that baby that we celebrate being born, this Jesus that came into the world, that the whole season that we're in right now is about, this Advent, this expectation, what that's about is the fact that that baby made everything. Everything that was made by him, and nothing that was made was not made except through him. That baby. And if you've ever had a baby, seen a baby, dealt with a baby, babies are helpless. And he goes, that, God chose to become that. To live with us, to dwell among us. The creator of the universe decided to come after us. I mean, if grace isn't a big enough gift for you, the fact that happened should be mind-boggling to us.
Amen.
He didn't come down lightning and thunder and a big sword and a throne. I mean, he's coming in a pretty dramatic way later. That's his second coming. The first time, though, he chose this way. He chose this way and said, you want to know what gift I give you? I give you grace. Know the one thing you can't earn? That's what I'm giving you. Know the one thing that you've been working for? I'm here to fulfill that. That is this Jesus, and that is this light, and that is the light that John is declaring Said he had one job, and it was to point toward the light. Christian, your one job is to point toward the light. If you don't believe in Jesus, I hope that you've heard it this morning, that he is your one and only hope, and the darkness cannot overcome him. He is everything. My hope is that he transforms us through this season. So after you open in 9 days, gift after gift after gift, and it's awesome and maybe not so awesome because it's socks, but thank you for the socks, right? And you're opening all these things that you remember one thing. You've already received the greatest gift you could ever receive. Amen. You've already got that. The cool thing about this gift, unlike the socks you might get, is those are to share, right? This gift that you've gotten of grace, this gift of the message of the light, that's to share. I guess you could share your socks too, but that'd be a little creepy. But you could, right? The point of this Jesus is to share this message. How can you receive such grace and not share that grace? I'll end with this. I remember I grew up, not grew up, but we moved when I was in high school. And I remember we went to this church, and nothing about, I'm not saying nothing bad about this church, but most of the time it was monotone hymn singing, and that's great, and you can worship like that. I'm not saying you can't, so I'm not starting a worship war here, and I don't want to have that discussion, but here's the point. It was, oh, come, ye men, right? Now, we had a couple come in that was visiting. They knew the pastor, and we were singing one morning, and I tell you what, my mind was blown as a 12-year-old because we're sitting there, and they're just like praising. And I was like, what? Why are their hands up? Right? It was blowing my mind, seriously. And afterwards, what I found out was that they had been saved from much. Right? I mean, I was sheltered growing up, just to be frank. Like, didn't see a whole lot of horrible things. But they were saved from a lot. It was really eye-opening to me to hear about, because the grace that they had received, they were freely giving. They knew what they had been saved from, and they were more than willing to give it back and to share it and talk about it. Christian, you have been saved from much. Amen. Right? Whether it is deeds that you've done or self-righteousness that you hold up in yourself, regardless if it's hidden or out, you've been saved from much. And because you've been saved from much from the one that has created the universe, that has handed you grace, are you sharing that grace? Are you sharing that message? Because I can tell you, it's really hard when you're in line at Walmart and you're 12th back and nobody's opening any more registers to think, and grace is not the first thing on your mind then, is it?
Self-checkout.
But remember, that's a common grace. Just remember, in those moments, you've been given grace. All the things in this world, all the darkness is not going to be overcome by this. The light is not going to be overcome by it. You've been given this grace. You've been saved from much. Are we sharing that this Christmas season? Is that the gift we're giving? Because the creator of the universe, the one that made all things, came to us to pursue us when he didn't have to. But he did it anyway.
Amen.
And he said, here's the gift. You want to know what God looks like? John says, there's Jesus. That's what God looks like. That's who God is. That's who you should follow. This season, let us be reminded of that. The greatest gift we could have received is this grace from Jesus. This honor of his presence when he didn't have to come. That is our gift. Are we sharing it? Let's pray.